Today, I'm talking about why you need to read Orconomics by Zachary Pike. This is the first book in the Dark Prophet series, which is comedic satire fantasy. And to be honest, I was unsure if I was going to enjoy this one. I'm not the biggest fan of satire. Oftentimes I kind of bounce off of satire books unless it's Discworld. But this book completely flipped that expectation on its head. It made me realize, just like Dungeon Crawler Carl did, that maybe comedic fantasy, maybe I actually like comedic fantasy more than I thought, especially when it's doing more than just making jokes and it knows when to be serious as well. Now let me be clear, this isn't Terry Pratchett, but fans of Discworld, you're going to have so much fun with Orconomics. I feel like this is definitely the closest thing to Discworld, but it's still its own thing. Now, Orconomics, this is actually a self-published fantasy, and it ended up gaining a lot of recognition online. It won the 4th season of the self-published fantasy blog off, hosted by Mark Lawrence, and I'm currently one of the judges for the SPFBO Champions League. This is where we're going through, all 10 judges are reading the previous 10 champions from the last 10 years. And basically we're ranking them all to find the champion of the champions. So at the end of this video, I'm gonna tell you where Orconomics lands in my ranking. This is actually the first one I'm reviewing, but before the 20th of December, I'm gonna be putting out a top 10 styled video where I'm ranking all 10 of them and announcing my champion. Now, getting into Orconomics, man, I wasn't sold on this book at the beginning, and maybe it's because I had those hesitancies about it being satire, but at the beginning I was worried that it was feeling too light and too just typical fantasy. I wasn't finding it that funny at the beginning, but then something shifted, and man, this book really grew on me. The deeper I got into it, I started to realize that I'm having a lot of fun. This book isn't just making me laugh, it's also making me think, and it's trying to say something. This is a cozy, laugh out loud fantasy that also makes you think about class and addiction and racial injustice and capitalism, all through the lens of this loot-driven hero economy, and it's brilliant. If you've ever wanted to read a blend of corporate culture, Dungeons and Dragon references, a meta commentary on fantasy tropes, a satire of the 2008 financial crisis, all blended together with humor into this epic high fantasy quest, then this book is for you. If that's what you're looking for, this is 100% for you. I didn't exactly know this was for me, but I ended up really enjoying this book. I'm very excited to read the sequel now. Now, I'm gonna get into the story and tell you what this book is about, but I first want to mention that I would highly recommend the audiobook. If you're into audiobooks, the narration is fantastic. He does different accents for different characters, and it just brought more emotion and production to the whole thing. In my opinion, it kind of elevated the book listening to the audiobook, because I started just reading it on my Kobo, but then once I switched to the audiobook, I didn't go back. I feel like the narration really enhanced the dialogue, and the dialogue is very important to this book. So let's talk about the story of Orconomics. We follow Gorm Ingerson, a disgraced dwarven hero who used to be one of the best, but now he's kind of a drunken mess. The man's washed up, but then after an encounter with an undocumented goblin that ends up following him, Gorm finds himself dragged into this bizarre prophecy, a fetch quest to recover the Elven Marbles, which is a spoof on the real-life Elgin Marbles. And he's dragged into a party of very dysfunctional adventurers. So premise alone, this is already great. And this is where I need to talk about, the economics of this world. In the world of Arth, adventuring is a corporate enterprise. Quests are underwritten by venture capitalists, and monster loot is sold to investors. And professional heroes are closer to Wall Street commodities than like noble heroes. Basically, there's corporations that buy the rights to these monster hordes, which are called plunder funds or collateralized threat obligations, and they hire heroes to retrieve these treasures for the shareholders, basically creating a market that is prone to financial speculation and potential collapse. Now, this kind of market makes it very difficult living for the monsters themselves, the Shadowkin, which include goblins, kobolds, and orcs, etc. They're just seen as walking plunder, and they're treated like second-class citizens. And the only way to avoid being indiscriminately killed and looted by heroes is to obtain non-combatant paper carriers, NPC status. There's a lot of like gaming references in here for tabletop games, but also kind of like MMOs and RPGs. Now, to get the NPC papers, this is a very bureaucratic process, and of course this kind of mirrors real-world stuff like immigration and labor exploitation. Now, Orconomics could have easily just been a string of jokes and puns, but Pike threads the needle between humor and heartbreak masterfully. This is a book that really made me care about the characters by the end of this. Like, I was surprised at how much I cared about them. When it comes to what he's commentating on, what he's making satire of, basically every real-world issue you can think of. He tackles everything from opioid addiction, which here it's kind of recast as healing potion dependence. Basically, in Orconomics, there's people that get so addicted to healing potions that they self-harm themselves so that they can then drink a potion and get that sweet ecstasy of their body healing itself rapidly. And as addiction goes, there ends up being people living on the streets, harming themselves just so that somebody will give them a healing potion. Honestly, this is one of the most interesting takes on addiction in a fantasy book that I've ever read, and it fits in perfectly with the RPG and gaming references in this book. It also tackles racial profiling, wealth inequality, systemic injustice, and there's this one scene where it kind of does a spoof on like gun ownership laws, where the character Gorm, he's trying to buy like a magical weapon, but you can't buy them without certain licenses and whatnot. It tackles all of these things, all these different concepts in such a great way. But at the same time, this isn't like a book that's trying to preach to you. It's not trying to push any type of agenda. It's just tackling issues that you know of in real life. It's reflecting the economics and politics of our world in a way that might give you some background anxiety because it hits so close to home. And yet, it's still so fun, even if it's reminding you of all the problems in real life. Now, pacing wise, I would say this book is actually kind of slower. We do have moments of high action, but a lot of this book is just letting the character dynamics simmer as we get lots of dialogue between these characters. And I think for comedic fantasy, this is kind of what it's all about. It's going to focus a lot on the dialogue and the interactions. There is a moment in the middle where I feel like it slowed down a bit and I was really waiting for it to pick up. Thankfully, it did pretty soon, and I was already invested in the story anyway. But yeah, the dialogue is where this book truly shines, and thankfully, we have an amazing cast of characters, which leads me to the next section. We need to talk about this chaotic, lovable adventuring party. The main character, Gorm, is a dwarven berserker, so he, rages. Well, not really rages. He just thinks about what he really has to fight for, and he lets that take over his battling sense. Anyway, he has a goblin squire, and this goblin that just starts following him at the beginning of the book. This goblin is one of my favorite characters in the book. He often provides the comic relief, and he's amazing. But Gorm, I would say, is the strongest character. He works really well in both those lighter, funny scenes, but then also in the more serious, like, heartwarming or heartbreaking scenes as well. We also have a mad prophet of a forgotten goddess who they're often undermining. We have two constantly bickering mages. They were actually two of my favorites. These mages both use different types of magic, so they can't really see eye to eye. And one of them is like a pyro mage, and they're constantly burning things down. But what I really loved is how over time we got to see their relationship kind of grow. We also got a health potion addicted elf warrior, and she kind of reminds me of like a closet drunk because she's often slipping away to just take a sip of a health potion. There's also a thief who thinks he's a bard, but he can't sing to save his life. But if you call him a thief, he gets offended. So forget what I said. He's a very good bard. There's also a knight with a literal death wish, and somehow Pike manages to balance all of these different character arcs with emotional weight and genuine growth, especially when it comes to Gorm, who's trying to reclaim his honor without losing his soul. They manage to play off of each other's differences so well, and they kind of form a found family despite their differences. And honestly, the ending of this was more emotionally impactful than it had any right to be. I was surprised at how moved I was by the end of Orconomics. Oh yeah, there's also this one character that's like working for one of these major companies, but he realizes the financial crisis that they're getting into, the economic collapse that's just about to happen. But those people above him, like the people that are running this company, they're just fueled by their greed and they don't really see it coming. And it's kind of entertaining to watch how oblivious they are as they're like marching to impending doom. Again, since we're talking about characters, I need to highlight the narrator for the audiobook, the different voices and speech patterns for the different characters. It was so great. It really made me become immersed in the story and care about this cast and like imagine the characters and the expressions they're making in my head because of how he's voicing them. So highly recommend the audiobook. Now let's talk about the writing style. I would say the writing style is very easy to get into. You know, it's not anything too difficult to read, but at the same time, it says so much. Like I said, this book is very funny. There's moments that are probably gonna make you laugh out loud, but then it also works in these serious issues in such inventive ways. It's also one of the fantasy books that I think covers like class struggle in one of the better ways that I've seen. As far as the type of humor, there is like some puns and stuff in there, but it's mostly situational humor. So the characters are getting in some funny situations, and the way that they act and respond to this is where a lot of the comedy comes in. It's what makes it funny. It feels much different to me than Dungeon Crawler Carl, which I also really love. The humor here is different. I'm not quite sure how to explain how it's different. Dungeon Crawler Carl makes just a lot of flat out jokes. It has a lot of very eccentric and odd characters. It makes sex jokes and it's kind of crude. Orconomics, I would say, is less crude humor and more situational humor. And it also isn't exactly like Terry Pratchett, like dry British humor either. It's its own thing. As far as the world building goes for this one, don't expect anything like too inventive. It does have some really interesting mechanics going on here, but this is your typical fantasy world with all the fantasy races that you know and love, a lot of the fantasy tropes you love, but he also manages to spin a lot of these like tropes on their head. This is kind of like your Dungeons and Dragons world and adventuring party, but seen through a comedic fantasy economic satire lens. I would say that Orconomics is Lord of the Rings meets Terry Pratchett meets The Big Short. And that's probably the most accurate way of describing the vibe of this book. Overall, this book was so much fun, and I've heard that book 2 gets even better, so I'm really excited to continue on with this series. I mean, this is a series where we're following a group of heroes that are basically all bankrupt, but it's all about what we value, how we define worth, and whether heroism can survive within a broken system. And it's also just a damn good adventure. It's so much fun. Orconomics is one of the most unique, smart, and funny books. I feel like it's doing what it's trying to do and be just a really great satire of real life and fantasy tropes. All that being said, I'm not gonna say this is a 10 out of 10 book. For me, I can see the potential that a lot of people are going to enjoy this, and I enjoyed it a lot as well, but I'd probably give it like a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. A lot of people think that a 7 is a bad ranking. That is not a bad ranking, guys. That is a good book. So yeah, 7.5 or 8 out of 10. Let me know what you would rank this book if you've read it. Now, as for the ranking for the self-published fantasy blog off Champions League, I'm going to place this book in number 3. Pretty soon here, I'm going to announce where the other 9 books stand in the ranking, but Orconomics, I'm going to lock in at number 3. Make sure to watch out for my next videos if you want to know what number 1 is going to be and where all the others stand on the ranking. Let me know if you plan on reading Orconomics or if you've already read it. Let me know your thoughts. Make sure to like and subscribe and all that stuff. Anyways, huge thank you to all my patrons and my channel members for making these videos possible.